Yeah, Zach?
I was wondering, would it be possible to use math in order to create the best possible song?
Hmm. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because Alex Melamid and Vitaly Komar conducted a study in which they used a series of polls to create the best possible and worst possible songs. Here they are.
Oh, I remember that. These two people down here, huh? I remember actually listening to it on This American Life, and it said that the polls were conducted in multiple countries and questioned things like people's favorite and least favorite genres, tempos, instruments, subject matter, and even voice pitch.
Yeah, that's correct, Zach. Songs were based upon what people were most likely to dislike, which included bagpipes, an unconventional mix of opera and rap, drastic changes in tempo and volume, and topics included cowboys and religious holidays.
Seems kind of weird to mix opera music and rap together, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I guess they both have a love for gold.
Ha ha ha.
I know, I'm very funny.
Well, I remember the songs based upon what most people were most likely to enjoy was kind of like a slow, generic R&B love song with a low female singer and a very conventional instrumentation like guitar and keyboard and drums and stuff like that.
Yep. Basically anything you can hear on the radio today, which is why probably the majority of musicians who listen to these two songs actually prefer the worst possible song, surprisingly.
Hey, shall we listen to some of the song?
Of course, I'm always up for a puppet dance party.
Oh boy, I am so excited.
God, I love that part.
The children's choir, huh? Singing about Arbor Day and Yom Kippur.
Those are my two favorite holidays, if you didn't know.
I like Christmas because of the stockings.
Aren't you cute, Zach?
Thanks, Nora. I'm pretty clever. Well, I guess my brilliant jokes aside, this does bring up a very important knowledge issue. Is it possible to use mathematics to replace creativity in the arts?
Well, you see, art is traditionally viewed as eliciting an emotional response, while math is seen as cold and methodical. Art is intuitive and math has a set procedure. What happens when you apply a set procedure to something that should be intuitive, such as in this case?
Well, I guess if you viewed it in like a reasonably, if you placed all of the components of a song you like individually, then you should probably like them as a whole, right?
Well, that's not necessarily true. Like we saw with the slow R&B song, it just ended up sounding generic. This brings up another question. To what extent does the method used to create something affect its artistic value?
Well, I guess we have to take into account the fact that in this particular situation, Melamid and Komar are kind of contradicting the popular conception of the artistic process.
Yeah, art is largely built on being unconventional and creative, and the artistic process is given as something spontaneous and operating outside of reason.
Math is much more linear. We're deviating from a specific process will give you a completely incorrect answer.
The application of math to art does change the traditional artistic process, but it doesn't usually affect the viewer's perception of the piece because they don't know that it's been applied.
Even if people don't realize it, math is used to supplement the creation of art. For instance, a concept called the rule of thirds is often used in the composition of visual images. This entails the creation of a grid, like we have here in this picture, that is applied to the positioning of the photograph or painting subject. By placing the subject on one of the grid's corners, like here, rather than directly in the center, the piece is able to maintain a certain level of tension and direct the viewer toward the focal point.
Ah, yes, yes. My eyes go straight to this very, very cute puppy. Thank you for sharing this picture with me, Zach.
No problem, Nora. I picked up the puppy just for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we also need to look at that art has the potential to be created in a linear manner also. For instance, one of our school's art teachers, Mr. Thompson, here he is, looking good with his handlebar mustache.
What a fine handlebar mustache that is.
Yes, yes. Don't you wish you could grow one?
Kind of.
Whoa.
Yarn.
Well, he likes to make concept webs, in which he writes his main idea on a page, and from there he branches off of this idea and adds what medium he wants to portray it in, and which will give him an idea of what color palette he wants to use. This is an example of a process he uses to generate creative ideas. The ideas just build on top of each other, similar to how when completing a math problem, you have a set method to solve it. He uses this method every single time he creates a piece.
I guess this brings up another question. Is it possible to be creative in math? You can kind of consider this when you think about how multiple methods can be used in order to solve a single question, which would probably denote a certain level of creativity. This also comes up with people creating new equations. The word creativity also brings up an important aspect of language, in the sense that it indicates some sort of original creation. Is the creation of a math equation any less beautiful than a piece of art?
Well, that brings up another question, Zach. Can math even be beautiful?
Well, I guess beautiful can be defined by pleasing the senses or mind aesthetically. Beauty requires an emotional response, but math is generally viewed as antithetical to emotion. However, beauty is so subjective that anything could be beautiful. It just depends upon the viewer. For instance, what I might see as beautiful, you might not see as beautiful. Math has the ability to ease the convenience of life, which may be viewed as beautiful to some. Some people have a passion for art, while others may have a passion for math. In the end, both have emotional ties.
Well, Zach, have you ever heard of the golden ratio?
The golden ratio?
Yeah, this is one instance where math can define beauty. You see here, there's this nice grid. Well, certain facial features will be aesthetically pleasing to the majority of the human population because they are in the correct positions. Like you can see here, Angelina Jolie, who's considered one of the most beautiful women in the world, fits this ratio pretty well. So some artists like to use this ratio to make their paintings more aesthetically pleasing. Dalí is one of the famous artists who used it. For instance, here's his painting, The Sacrament of the Last Supper. And you can see here he's used the golden rectangle in order to make this piece more aesthetically pleasing.
Well, I guess you also have to take into account that other artists choose to deliberately ignore the golden ratio.
Hmm.
For instance, Picasso ignored it in the construction of faces with analytical cubism, and his paintings are still considered beautiful. By taking traditional subject matter and ignoring what should technically make the painting aesthetically pleasing, Picasso introduced a level of creativity and innovation that made him widely admired in the world of contemporary art.
Hmm. That's a good point, Zach. I never thought about it like that. However, art is not the only place we see the golden ratio. We can even see it in music, or rather hear it, I guess. Eric Satie, a prominent French composer, used the ratio to compose his piece Sonneries de la Rose et Croix. The golden ratio can be applied to what people find orally beautiful as well as visually.
However, dissonant or cacophonous music directly contradicts the golden ratio, but can still be understood as beautiful due to its subjectivity.
That's very, very true. A listener who is less familiar with music may not understand dissonant music, quite like what we were playing earlier today, while someone who is well versed in oral beauty is more likely to appreciate the piece because they view it as creative.
Hmm. For instance, I've had this problem. I've had this discussion before many times with both my father and my last year music theory teacher. Ignore the fact that my father is not SOC. I believe in being non-discriminational or non-discriminational. So, what Mr. Musin, as a professional musician, points out is that it takes someone who is been trained in music for a long period of time and has been exposed to it to understand the fact that music that does not sound conventionally beautiful can be beautiful. However, my father, who enjoys very, very simple music, acoustic, and just things that would be considered catchy or fun to listen to, would usually argue that it doesn't matter what other people think and that simple music is just generally more pleasing, and that more distant music that may be a reaction to other types of music is just pointless and pretentious and not technically considered beautiful.
Ah, interesting story. Math can be beautiful, but something does not necessarily have to abide by a mathematical rule in order to be beautiful. I think that's what we can take away from your story. Those songs your dad likes because they happen to abide by one of those mathematical rules may be pleasing, but I don't think that the dissonant music, like Schoenberg's music, for instance, shouldn't be discounted just because it doesn't abide by those same simplistic rules. Math is more a means to an end rather than the end itself.
Well, I don't know. This has given me a lot to think about. After talking about the golden ratio and dissonant music and all of this kind of thing, I'll probably come to the conclusion that math can supplement the creative process, but still lacks the potential to completely replace it.
Yeah. Someone with formal training, like Mr. Musin, may be limited in their creative processes just because they feel this obligation to abide by these mathematical rules toward what is considered aesthetically pleasing, while someone without it might be more likely to stray away from them and chance upon something more original due to their application of trial and error.
That's a good point. I guess it's also important to take into account that art is largely reactionary. So having a good knowledge of art might improve their ability to produce good art because they would know what it is that they should react to.
Very true. We can see this in art history where Cezanne started using gigantic brushstrokes and unnaturalistic color because he was reacting against Monet's scientific application of color, but he still used the same process of using big giant brush strokes, so he had that reaction to impressionistic art.
That's really interesting. I get art is kind of just a giant conversation, huh? And like making it, just turning into a mathematical process would kind of devalue what it is. I guess this would also bring up what our definition of art as a field would be. Now we've kind of figured that art is generally geared towards contradicting preconceived notions of what art should be.
You're right. By adhering to some sort of strict mathematical process, one could even make the argument that this is devaluating the creative aspect of art, which is such a major integral component of it.
Yes. Since I think that after hearing a lot of songs and looking at art pieces and all of this stuff, art isn't just about producing what looks or sounds good, but producing something that's kind of different from something else. Kind of like with the real life situation we had. The generic song was just forgettable and bland and sounded like some top 40 chart we'd heard on the radio a few thousand times. Well, the reason that most people preferred the song with the opera singer and the cowboy subject matter and the choir of little kids singing about Arbor Day, Arbor Day, and Yom Kippur was because of the fact that it was memorable and it was unique. And it was this unique aspect that kind of made it art rather than just something that was pleasing to our ears.
Definitely. I think a lot of the times people are kind of afraid to make something so bad. So in this one case when they really didn't have any worries about that and they kind of just wanted to create something that was as bad as possible, that allowed them to be more creative and take more risks, which produced the song that somehow ended up being actually quite interesting to listen to.
Yes. Well, I guess that we could also say that just because something isn't classically beautiful, the context and originality of the piece can give it a certain degree of beauty. I guess it would be kind of like saying something is beautiful because of the fact that it's different and interesting and something that other people haven't done before. Basically, this is a beauty that requires you to think about why it's beautiful.
Very true. You know, Zach, a lot of people would think that we were classically beautiful because, you know, we definitely don't fit that golden ratio grid with our floppy little mouths. But I think the fact that we have this yarn hair, and these button eyes and mouth, I think that's quite a nice look, actually. They might actually enjoy it.
Yeah, and hey, I mean, beauty is very subjective, isn't it? I mean, someone might find my rather socky look and my green hair and my kind of glued on buttons to be kind of attractive because you really can't say that what people find aesthetically pleasing is objective. And I guess you'd have to say that art as a field is generally subjective.
Very true. An artist can't predict what his audience is going to think about his piece. So he really can't make it with a certain intention. He can just make what he wants to make because it is so subjective.
Yeah. However, I do think that using math in the process is very important. I mean, you can't really have an artist and like a good artist in a certain field that doesn't integrate certain known processes towards creating something that is truly original. I guess it takes a mixture of the two. So I guess if you are going to use your math or use math as your only method in creating a piece of art, it goes against what art is supposed to be. However, it can be used to supplement the process, and there definitely is a correlation between math and art.
Of course. I'm glad we came to this conclusion today, Zach. And now we can continue making some beautiful music.
I am so excited.